Welcome back to another Kind of Funny Gamescast. Of course, I'm Tim Gettys, joined by one of the coolest dudes in video games, Greg Miller.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm fantastic. The new face video games blessing, Adeoye Jr.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
And Brittney Brombacher is joining us to talk about Resident Evil Village. So exciting! We had to get you. Last time we had you on Gamescast was Resident Evil 2 review, I want to say.
It
or
was.
spoiler cast. Maybe
Yeah,
that was a long time ago, back at the studio, the old times.
Back in those days before the pandemic.
Yeah, before babies left and right.
Oh, shit. No kidding. I thought for sure this would be the game that put me into labor, but apparently not.
It's going to be this review that puts you into labor.
No, that's the thing. I was like, there is a chance. It's slim, but there is a chance that, water breaking, and I'm not exactly sure how babies work, but,
I was going to say,
things are going to start.
How this starts.
You know what? This is the Kind of Funny Gamescast, where each and every week we get together to talk about video games and all the things that we love about them. You can get it on youtube.com/kindoffunny or roosterteeth.com. If you want to get the podcast version, just search your favorite podcast service for Kind of Funny Gamescast, and we'll be right there for you. If you want to get the show ad-free, watch it live as it's being recorded, and get the exclusive post-show, patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, just like our Patreon producers, Omega Buster, Tyler Ross, Delaney Twinning, Julian, the gluten-free gamer, James Hastings, Casey Andrew, Elliot, and Tom Bach have done a whole bunch of new names there. Thank you all very much. We appreciate you. Old names, we appreciate you just as much as we always have. Thank you so much, Tom Bach. We love you. Yes, exactly. You know what? Housekeeping, don't even want to do it. I literally just beat Resident Evil Village to the point that I had to delay this like 5 minutes to be able to keep going and get through the credits and all that stuff. So I'm raring to go. I'm ready to talk. Britt, I want to start with you. Resident Evil Village, what are your thoughts?
Oh, okay. Resident Evil Village. So I'm approaching this from the perspective of a crazed Resident Evil fan. So I just want to make that very, very clear. I've been with the series since 1998. Like, I love the lore. I read the lore as a side hobby. Like, I need a new hobby. So with all of that said, I loved the first, and I finished the game in 11 and a half hours. I loved the first 5 or so hours of Resident Evil Village. And a lot of this encompassed what we saw in those free demos, right? You know, it's when you explore the village for the first time, you explore the castle. After that set piece of Lady Dimitrescu's castle, I kind of turned down from a love to a like. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I don't know how in-depth you want me to go right now. But what I would say is, as far as a survival horror game goes, I think it was fantastic. As far as a Resident Evil game goes, and kind of building off of the foundation of Resident Evil, particularly Resident Evil 7, I would say it was pretty good. But it wasn't that lore-heavy story that I was really going for. I really wanted.
Greg, you look like you're itching. Go for it.
It's such a sigh of relief. Because, Britt, how long have we known each other?
A long ass time, Greg.
A long ass time. We won't date ourselves. But it was that thing of coming in and I was like, oh man, I didn't vibe with Resident Evil Village. And I wonder if, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. And I wonder if I've never been, I went back actually and watched our Resident Evil 7 review, which was fun to go back and see studios and old Gamescast. And both me and Tim, I think, a few pounds ago. I was like, damn. Time has not been kind to me. But it was this idea of going through and Resident Evil 7 was the first Resident Evil I fell in love with, where the VR and the world and the things, and then to go from there to Resident Evil 2 and then to be excited for Resident Evil Village. The entire time I think was in that I like this. I don't love this. I could put this down and never come back to it. I'm gonna see it through. Obviously, I beat it. I think my game clock was 8:45, 8 hours, 45 minutes or whatever, and I was very much okay, cool, the whole way through. But it didn't have the highs I felt that 7 did. It didn't have the scares that 7 did. It didn't hook me that way. And I feel like the game does a really great job of being survival horror. It totally has that, the thing I love about these games, which is I'm going to go to every building and then you get that key. And you're like, this opens that door. And I go back and I open that door and there's a new thing to go do and get, and then you get, this is going to do. And that serotonin hit, right? As you go through of oh, this is hitting the spot is there. But as you're talking, Britt, the bosses you run into, the world that's sitting on top of it and the motivations that are pulling you through just didn't click for me.
Blessing.
Yeah, so this is actually really fun to hear because I thought I was going to come into this review and it would have been a repeat of the Miles Morales review where I'm like, I liked it, I didn't love it, and then everybody else was like, this is the greatest thing. And I'm kind of right there. I'm kind of right there with you guys where I really like this game. I do not love this game, and I'm coming into this from a very different place than Britt, where Britt is the super Resident Evil fan. I'm somebody who's never really been truly in love with Resident Evil. In fact, I feel like I'm kind of infamous for it in certain places where like Resident Evil 4 is a game that I still don't think has aged well. I do not like the way that game controls. I still go back to it every now and then to see if I'm maybe wrong about my opinion. And every time I go back to it, I'm like, no, I still don't like how this controls. Resident Evil 7, I've been playing over the last few weeks, and I actually have been enjoying my time with that one. And RE2 Remake is actually my favorite Resident Evil. I loved RE2 Remake and thought it was one of the best games that year.
A fantastic game.
Overall, Resident Evil as a franchise just has been something that I've been super crazy about. And Resident Evil Village, I'd say for me, the best things that the game does are one, the game is beautiful. I think it is a marvel to look at in so many places. Duke, the shopkeeper, whenever I would come across him, I would just like sit for a second and just look at him and his animations and go like, man, he's a really good looking character. You know, good looking in terms of like how crisp all this stuff is.
Qualify that.
Yeah, he's graphically beautiful. And so like I think that's one of the things that the game does really, really well. And I think one of the other things that the game does really well is the way that it tackles being a survival horror game. I think the pacing of the game is really good, where it feels like every other hour you are participating in a new type of horror, which is something that I think is really fascinating for this game to tackle, because you kind of go back and forth in terms of like, in this area you're dealing with this thing, in this area you're dealing with this other thing, and the game finds very different ways to be scary in different moments, in ways where I'm like, man, this could be a different game when I'm playing over here. And I think that really shines through in the game. But then you get to other things, which is the story to me fell so flat. There are certain things where I'm like, this seems like it's for fans of the genre, or fans of the franchise. But for me, I'm like, this didn't hit for me at all. And then there's also the character of Ethan Winters, who's the character you're playing as, who through the whole game is just the worst. Maybe one of the worst protagonists I've had the pleasure of playing in a game in the last 10 years. Like he is. Every single one of his lines is delivered with just no personality. You know,
why does this keep happening to me? It feels like the
my
points.
arm. Oh no.
Oh no. Like he feels like such a blank slate of a character, and of course, like he kind of is a blank slate of the character, but he just has no personality. When you take that and you pair it with some of the other characters in the game, which I think do have a lot of personality and are actually really great in some cases, I think overall it just leads to a story that didn't strike me as amazing or anything. It felt very serviceable for the type of game that it is. And so overall, I really enjoyed my experience with it, but I didn't love it.
I'm definitely the odd man out here. I fucking loved Resident Evil Village. I think that it is easily the best designed Resident Evil game we've ever seen. And the things that make Resident Evil what it is from a gameplay perspective, of the serotonin hits Greg was talking about, but just the way that every kind of dungeon is designed to, you're backtracking, but this game feels like there was less bullshit backtracking than I've had in the other games, and especially comparing it to Resident Evil 7, which I didn't vibe that much with. I enjoyed it, but I was like, this isn't necessarily my cup of tea. It was more nasty than it was scary. And I think that with Village, it really does a good job of varying up the scares between jump scares, between atmosphere. And when it comes to atmosphere, I don't know that I've ever seen a game. I know for a fact this is the scariest game I've ever played at points, not all the way through, but at points, because of how insane they nailed the tech of it all. The sound design, the graphics are fucking terrifying. The surround sound for this, whether it's 3D audio in your headphones or me in the freaking theater I have, it might be that. It might be the fact that I had to play with the lights off because of the projector and all this shit. But I was terrified like throughout this entire game. But I also was terrified at the horrible dialogue. And good Lord, Ethan Winters. This is undeniably the highest quality game I've ever played, with the absolute trash tier dialogue and story to go along with it. And I can't believe that those things don't match up. I think the pacing of the game is fantastic. I feel like with rare exception, the puzzles made sense. And there are exceptions to that. And there was one time I had to call Bless. And I was just like, I don't know what the fuck to do. And the answer was to shoot a lock And I'm like,
Oh, I got stuck there too, man. I feel you.
we've been taught our entire video game history that that's not how this works. That you don't just blunt force your way through things, and all of a sudden you do sometimes. And I'm like, But besides
but
those
I
little
like
moments,
that. I like that. I didn't get stuck at it because it was for me. This isn't a puzzle solution. We're allowed to talk about this, but because it happens a couple different times once you learn that thing. But it was that thing of wandering around that area, and I remember being like, "What the hell do I do next?" And I walked up to that, and I was like, "Wait a second, it's not telling me." Like, because usually you go there like you don't have a key for it or whatever. Some message pops up, and that's when I took out my knife and slashed it. And I was like, "All right." I like the little bit of realism there. Shoot the glass, cut the thing, get out of there.
I just feel like it wasn't backed up with any type of like teaching, any tutorial at all. And
Sure.
it's just like in fact, it's the opposite where you're taught not to do it.
Yeah,
So
like
it's
any door
those moments
that's
took me out of
closed
it.
in Resident Evil has a reason for it to be closed. And that was one of the doors where it's like you go up to it and it's closed, and it's like, all right, what puzzle am I solving? And no, you just had
Not a
to
puzzle.
Yeah, usually you need the bolt cutters for that kind of shit.
Yep.
But no, it's
Exactly.
literally as easy as shooting it. Oh.
Yeah. So it's like those type of things are throughout the game, but they're in all of the Resident Evil games. And I think to me, this one from a gameplay perspective kept it varied between the action side and the horror side very well, where there was always kind of a back and forth where it kind of felt hour to hour, or maybe like 2 hour to 2 hour would go from like intense dungeon that is about the jump scares and what's around the next corner and all that. And then, okay, now you're in a bit more of an open field. You got a lot of ammo and you're just like kind of like hunting these motherfuckers down. And I feel like it is the most fun Resident Evil that I've had in a while. And I'm with Blessed that Remake 2 is my favorite of the Resident Evil so far. And with this, I'm like, I don't know. This is pretty high up there. But it does fall because from a RE lore perspective, I really think it missed the mark. And the Ethan Winters character is just
bad.
it's more than bad. It's like Greg, your impression of him is it's spot on. Every single thing he says is the most bizarre thing and just done in the most bizarre way, where it's just like, oh, I'm mad at you. What? Why are you doing this? Oh,
It's
you
laughable.
bitch.
Everything
like,
he does
why
is
do you have to say
laughable.
that?
And I think one of the craziest things about it is the supporting cast surrounding him just isn't laughable. They aren't like that. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like when Chris Redfield shows up, I was like, who is playing him? His voice actor is great. This is, you know what I mean? Like I was into it. And then Ethan opens his stupid fucking mouth. Like, who directed you? Who wrote this?
There's one character in there that I felt was like close to Kojima levels of, wow, this is a cool character with really cool voice acting and really cool, like a really cool gimmick, you know, like it's weird how the game feels like it runs the spectrum of Ethan Winters, who's the most bland, wet blanket of a character, going all the way up to certain like Lady Dimitrescu has a whole community that is thirsting after her. There are other characters in the game that are like fucking dope as shit. And it's so weird to me that, they somehow landed on Ethan Winters being what Ethan Winters is in this game. He's so lame.
Ethan doesn't lend himself to the lore of Resident Evil in any way, shape, or form. I mean, in the sense that, of course, like he carries kind of this new story along. But I think the problem with that, and Tim, I'm sure you know this more than anyone, is that Capcom loves to avoid the plot holes and they love to introduce new story twists without ever closing what happened in the past. And I think that was one of the main issues I had with this Resident Evil game is because I replayed Resident Evil 7 right before hopping into Village because I wanted a refresher on like what the fuck Ethan's deal was, etc. And as you're playing Resident Evil Village, there are so many things that happen in 7 that just are not touched upon. There's a few major organizations that are never talked about. And on top of that, they go to introduce a whole bunch of new stuff, but not really expand on it in a really interesting way. And I think that was part of the reason why, for me, Village it started hitting the mark in the beginning because you had Lady Dimitrescu's castle, which reminded me of the Spencer Mansion from RE1. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. And the other set pieces that are in that game, for me, weren't very exciting. I felt like having an hour to an hour and a half in each one of those wasn't really enough to expand on what I thought Resident Evil could have been, what I thought Resident Evil Village could have been. Because then it's like, okay, well, you have these new antagonists, but what do they add to the overall Resident Evil lore? And I think that's part of the reason why I'm like, I don't know if I loved it or if I would consider this to be the most fun. Because I would rather have had like a huge sprawling estate like an RE7, where you get to go to the main house, you have the guest house, you have the swampy area. And it does feel like you're kind of in this controlled area. But with this, it's like a little piece of this, a little piece of this, a little piece of this. And it didn't come together in a way that I had hoped.
It kind of reminds me, right, of how we talk about every superhero movie, where it's like when they go for the Spider-Man 3 for Raimi, or they go for a Justice League, and you're like, there's just too much in this, so you don't get as much as you want out of it. Where I mean, like to bring it. I don't think I'm into spoiler territory. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of stuff we don't want to ruin it for you, but like, there's 4 lords, right, working underneath a boss or whatever, and so like that's where you're going through these different areas and getting them. And for me, the second lord, which is this woman ventriloquist, like that for me was the coolest. Like that was you're talking about Lady Dimitrescu. Did I say that right? Of like how cool she is, and I liked her castle fine, and obviously she's tall and sexy, and everybody knows that. But like in terms of like a cool survival horror like thing, I was in love with that second dungeon area, whatever you want to call it. But it was over so quickly. Like I went through. I remember getting the MacGuffin you're after and being like, oh. Really? Like, okay. And I got out and I was like, oh man, maybe I'm going to cruise through this game. And like, I appreciate not them feeling like we have to stay there and we're going to get bored and we're going to make you do the same thing over and over again. But then I also feel like that was a wasted opportunity because all these characters, I think, could have been cooler than they are if they would have had more time with them.
See, I don't know, because like that was my favorite of the biomes as well, word of the week. But I really feel like it did the most with the time that it had, and it would have overstayed its welcome if it was any longer. And I feel like there's a lot of gimmicks that I don't want to talk about, and like things. I think that each of the different areas with the different lords was so well thought out with the characters, and it made them Kojima-esque. And I get that at some point it's kind of cheating to just be like, oh, there's a team of bad guys, so it's like Foxhound. It's like, okay, it's not quite that, but I did enjoy all of them, and especially in comparison to the protagonist. But I think that they did a really good job, like Blessing was saying, of making each of those levels, those dungeons, kind of feel like a different horror genre, but it still felt like it belonged in this world. Does it belong in the world of Resident Evil? That is a much bigger debate that I am totally on Brittany's side, where it's like, I think this game would have been better if it was just Village, if it was just its own thing that wasn't tied to the previous lore at all, because we're kind of like looking for certain things, and there's some fun stuff for sure. But I think that when you just kind of take it as, instead of trying to fit these 4 different people into the established lore, and instead just look at the story they're telling here. Again, the story still isn't that great, but those character stories great. Like there's so many moments and elements of it that are awesome. And I think they're backed up by really, really cool, unique gameplay experiences that I can compare here and there to certain things or certain movies. But I really appreciate the fact that Greg's talking about this doll person, and it's just like, okay, cool. That experience is a lot more like PT-esque than I would expect from something. Whereas later there's another one that's like straight up Saw. And I liked that. It's like, I like that there's like these elements that aren't necessarily something that we'll expect from Resident Evil. And that's on top of the Lady Dimitrescu castle that I think was one of the better mansion type Resident Evil environments we ever got, because it felt like a mix between Spencer Mansion and Raccoon City Police Department in kind of its layout and everything. And I had a really good time with it, and it being as next gen as it is, like I can't talk enough about the technical quality of this game and just how insane it is, how immersive the entire experience is, and being in the castle and having Lady Dimitrescu like stomp around, you hear her kind of like coming at you, like, you know, we've had before in RE2 and RE3 and stuff. Like, I feel like this really did a good job of almost being a greatest hits, but missing a couple of the key hits to make it like purely that.
Yeah, I think that's too where it comes into play is, how do you approach this game? Do you approach it as like a longtime Resident Evil fan where you're, so used to the formula, or do you approach it from like, hey, I just really want a really great survival horror experience? And I think if you don't come from it from the angle that I'm kind of like playing devil's advocate here, because, like I've been playing this game forever, is I feel like Capcom is just kind of straddling this line of, do we appease these longtime Resident Evil fans who know the lore inside out, who want to know where the story is going? Or do we want to create more of, I don't want to say generic, that's not the right word for it, but more of a survival horror game that is almost approachable to anybody? And I think the issue is how can they strike that happy medium, or can they strike that happy medium? I don't know. Because, Bless, I know you're not super familiar with Resident Evil, and I know you're just now playing Resident Evil 7. Did you find yourself like wondering what the fuck is going on in RE8 at any point?
Like a little bit, but I stopped caring at a certain point because
Okay.
I'm aware of who Chris Redfield is, and like I at a point in this game I actually paused the game and I was like, all right, who are the protagonists of each of the Resident Evil games? Because I've learned that there's a ton of them, and I'm familiar with like Leon and a few of the other ones, but there came a certain point in the game where I was like, forget it. It just seems like this is a whole different thing that might be connected in weird ways, but I'm not going to care about it right now. And even by the time I finished it, I didn't feel motivated to go look into the stuff that I was missing. You know, I felt very much like, all right, yeah, it is what it is. It's a horror experience, and it doesn't even feel it. The stuff that seems like it connects back to the greater lore didn't strike me as interesting enough to really care about it too much.
I will say the story adds up. And it's like, that's not necessarily a compliment, but anytime I was like, why is this happening? Or how is this possible? By the end of the game, I was like, they gave an answer. Was it a good answer? Not necessarily, but it's like, they definitely had a story that they were telling with it. And I think that all the elements kind of add up to that. But it did kind of leave me scratching my head because at the end, I'm like, okay, well, I saw that coming. Like the first moment this game started. You know what I mean? Like, it's so just not creative for how creative so many elements of the game are. Like, I think the village itself is such a good kind of hub between everything, and I don't think that it feels disconnected like superhero stuff can. Like, I think that they feel like
not disconnected, that there's just too much stuff in there. That's all.
Gotcha. But like not built up enough, whatever. I feel like there was enough of each one of those because like there's certain set pieces in certain kind of areas that I'm like, I am happy that I only spent X amount of time in this area. You know what I mean? Like, and that's not a bad thing. It was just like, you did what you had to do there. We can move on.
I do want to shout out how scary this game was in certain moments, because I think this might be the Resident Evil game that had me the most scared consistently throughout the game.
Really?
My biggest fear in any video game, specifically, and especially Resident Evil, because they do it all the time apparently, is having a character just be persistently existing in the same area as you that is hunting you down. And like this game had that. This game had that along with a bunch of other stuff, right? Like each of the different areas I felt worked for me in terms of the actual horror, scary aspect of it. And I want to go into the detail, but I know we actually can't because I don't want to like spoil anything. But I think they found a good way to have really, really well paced horror that worked.
I wasn't really scared by this game. RE7 to me was by far the scarier game. And I think that was mostly because you were in this dim lit house the whole time. You knew that the bakers were crazy and like chasing you, and the sound in that. I mean, the sound in RE Village is obviously fantastic, if not better than RE7. But for some reason, and in my opinion, it just came together better in RE7. But in RE8, I mean, we've seen the lichens and all the preview coverage. So like, that's not a spoiler. But maybe it's just like that doesn't bother me as much. Or maybe it's just I've been playing these games for so long that I know when to anticipate the scares. There was one moment, and again, I won't go into details, in the second biome, the word we're all using, that I literally had to take my headphones off and walk away because it was so effing disturbing, and it scared the out of me. And other than that, though, I thought it was definitely tense, but I was never like pissed in my pants. Scared.
I never did find the lichens that scary. Like everything else in the game, yeah, but like the lichens are definitely way less scary than actual zombies.
Yeah, I'm right there with Britt, where I to the point that like I went back and when I was watching Blessin' Andy's best of Resident Evil 7 moments, right? Like I'm watching you guys do it and like freak out about walking through the house and like watching the tape of the found footage, and then your girlfriend popping up and you guys are making jokes about her, and like I was like, damn, this was a scary game. Like I forgot, and I'm in the middle of playing Resident Evil 8 at the same time, or Village. And I never had that in here. Like I even jump scares about it. And I think it's something to do with the setting. I think it's something to do. It's honestly, I think harkens back a little bit to the conversation that was happening right before this of like, what I loved about 7 was at the start of that game and getting into it was like, cool, this feels like a brand new jumping on point for a Resident Evil fan like myself, where you're doing something different and nobody knows who Ethan Winters is or what the hell's going on. So what is this story? And it was that you're in a house, what's happening? It is PT-ish, it is haunted house like of things jumping out at you. Whereas to pick back up here, like immediately, like as soon as it all starts happening and what do you think, Ethan? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you've lived through hell before and it's happening again, but he doesn't have that moment ever of like, fine, then I'm going to own it. But as a player, I did feel that where I was like, okay, cool. And so going through it, yeah, I wasn't ever scared like I was. I think of Resident Evil 2 And I think of those moments of, having 2 in the chamber, looking for ammo, and you come into a room and you know that there's that zombie over there. And if you can just get around him and lumber past him, you're going to, but if they grab you and this thing jumps out. And this one, the entire time I felt in control, where it was that even when like the big, the immovable object steps up and like he's only got one very small weak point and he can totally screw me up. I was like, I'm green. I'll run. I'll take the hit from him and slip by him and get out. Like, I think one of the things I remember complimenting so much about Resident Evil 7 was that it always felt like you were one mistake away from being screwed. Where it was always like I'd get out of these battles and have one bullet left, you know what I mean? Or just barely red or something like that. That didn't happen. I was playing on just whatever standard, normal difficulty, whatever they call it. And so like I could have cranked it up to harder if I really wanted a challenge like that, I guess, or something like that. But this felt like, I was on a scary amusement ride that was trying to be scary, but was never overtly scary the way 7 was.
I want to say right before we started shooting, I saw a tweet, and we all know tweets are like the truth 100% all the time.
100%.
100%. That director Mori Masasato had said something about wanting to reduce the scariness of RE Village because of complaints that RE7 itself was too scary. Don't know if that's true.
So weird.
That would be a weird thing, right? But I remember seeing that, and I was like, huh. But if that's true, maybe that had something to do with why it felt a little different in Village.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like to me, like I said, the gore stuff has never really scared me. And like I just that kind of idea of like you're limited on ammo and all that, that's not the type of scary that I am looking for in a video game. Like I definitely am more about the atmosphere, definitely more about the jump scare stuff. And I think that like Village, in my opinion, is a masterclass of jump scares. There's like 4 or 5 of them. And I'm like, they did a great job and they earned it, especially in the second area. But the biggest thing for me in terms of the scares and stuff is this game, when it comes to the enemies and stuff, I didn't have a issue challenging anybody ever. Like it felt like I never was running out of ammo, period. And I think that's the thing too, is I was 11 hours on my clock when I beat it. And I was talking to Greg and Bless, trying to make sure I got it done before Gamescast, trying to judge how much I had to play. And they're like, oh yeah, it's like 8 or 9 hours. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm definitely going to be good. And it came to a point that I was like, guys, like, how far am I? You're like, you have like at least 3 hours left. And I was like, what the fuck? And I think it's just because how I play Resident Evil, I go around, try to go to every room, try to get everything. And my character was OP as fuck. Mm-hmm. So I never really kind of like played it as a survival horror game in the sense of the gunplay and stuff. It was more just about everything else that was going on, the puzzles, the rooms, and the shadows. There's so many goddamn shadows in this game.
Oh,
What's up, Les?
So that's actually the thing I definitely wanted to bring up, because I pretty much played the opposite way, where I felt, or I didn't feel, I was presumably underleveled as fuck, because I was having issues figuring out the inventory system. I messaged you guys like 4 hours in, and I was like, "Hey, is there a way to store things in this game? Like, I can't find what the you know how in Resident Evil every storage or every save room has a storage thing. This game doesn't have that." And what I realized was that like late in the game, I wasn't expanding my inventory the way that I was supposed to be expanding my inventory. Basically, there's a way that they switched it up in this game that was different from previous games. So I was missing that entirely. And so what would happen was I would find new weapons and wouldn't have space to pick them up. And so I'd either drop weapons or just decide to skip weapons. And so throughout this game, I had way less the amount of weapons that I than the standard playthrough would theoretically have. And what I found was that shit did not matter. Like the Resident Evil games are known for having a smart system in terms of managing how much ammo you have versus how much health an enemy have and making sure that as a player you feel just barely equipped for any situation. And I think in that, even though theoretically I was way underpowered because I didn't have all the ammo and all the weapons that I should have had, I had zero problem and still felt like I was playing very competently and barely died in actual combat, because the game was basically tailoring itself around, all right, cool, you have just a pistol and a shotgun, cool, let's make sure that you can kill all these enemies with a pistol and a shotgun, which took a lot of the challenge out of it for me.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the inventory system harkened back to Resident Evil 4, where you have like this Tetris-like grid now where you have to kind of like change the shape of the weapons and like, fit them in a certain way so they all make sense. And what's interesting too is, and they also did this in RE4, is your valuables, so the things that you can sell to upgrade with the Duke are in a new tab, and so are your key items. So like your keys, your emblems, your crests, etc. And yeah, I mean that's interesting though, but that you said that, Bless, because I think Tim and I play Resident Evil very similarly in the sense that we always go back. I'm always opening my map to make sure that every building in there is blue, which means I found all of the things. I want all of the weapons, I want all of the mines, the pipe bombs, etc., etc. And yeah, like I came to a point where I had expanded my inventory to the maximum amount and I didn't have enough room. I still didn't have enough space because I had too much shit. I was like, all right, well, maybe I'm playing this a little too good. But it's interesting that you had a pistol and a shotgun and you were like, I'm good.
Yeah, it's like
All I need.
I'm fine. I had pistol
Wow.
and shotgun, one other weapon, and if I was playing the correct way or the way that I probably should have been playing, I would have had a number of more weapons more than that. And I was cool. I was cool the whole way.
And that's
through.
the thing, yeah. Like I felt like I was swimming in ammunition the entire time. Like which isn't a negative necessarily, but it just isn't the
pro for me,
balance
for
of
sure.
7.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
It was a pro for me for sure. Like I definitely preferred this, and like I liked that we can get to the next stage to kind of like get to the scary set pieces that they're like crafting for us to have, as opposed to just kind of like having the combat itself be the scary part. Like we've gotten that a lot in Resident Evil games, and that's great. But I liked that this one was a little bit like different. Having said that, the combat, like this game is a different type of action survival horror blend. Like we've gotten Resident Evil games like 5 and 6 were more on the action side. This I would put more similar to that compared to 7, where it's like 7 was a lot slower, even though it was a first-person shooter or first person. This one feels like a first-person shooter a lot, and I think a lot of that's backed up too by all the different systems of the crafting and like the way that you're enhancing your weapons, and it feels a little bit like there's more depth than the last couple games. Not too much more, but every weapon feels like it has a couple more levels to it for things you have to get. But part of the combat is L1 is block. And that is like, there aren't that many buttons you use in the game. Like, it's essentially shoot, aim, move. I never blocked in this game.
Never.
No.
Ever. I don't understand why it was there. They kept telling me to do it. I'm like, but I don't need to. I could just move. Like, I just feel like the game wasn't built around what are the core buttons of it, which felt a little weird to me.
I blocked a few times, granted, like a few times throughout an 11.5-hour experience. It's like not a necessary mechanic. But yeah, I thought the block was interesting. And I think that might have something to do again with Capcom kind of making Ethan attempt to be this normal run-of-the-mill protagonist that may or may not have survived a crazy Baker estate incident back in Louisiana, but now he's here. But to give him the ability to block, I think that was an interesting thing, but not necessary. I mean, there are moments where you have like a Lycan coming at you or something and you block, and sure, it like lowers the amount of damage you can take. And there are ways that you can upgrade your block to take even less damage. So you take even less damage. But that was never a mechanic that I felt like upgrading at all. I was just like, let me upgrade my health. That's all I need.
Totally.
Yeah. I didn't do any of the defense upgrades. I'm like, why would I need to?
I was gonna ask, how many upgrades did you guys use? Period, because I think I upgraded one thing, like in terms of my like you can level up essentially by like resource gathering and giving your resources to Duke, and he'll give you like a buff. And I think I did that once, and when I did it, I accidentally allocated, or not even accidentally, I just happened to have the resources for the block upgrade, and so I was like, I guess I'll just do it for that.
That's how I found out there was a block. When I went in there, I'm like, "What is this? If it makes this dish, I have a block." I was like, "Oh, okay, I haven't used that and haven't needed to use that."
But I didn't really upgrade outside of that, and it wasn't really a problem.
I was so upgraded, my Ethan Winters could take on the sun.
Oh my god!
Like that.
Dear Lord, the sun.
Yes. With no
Son of
blocking
God.
either. So impressive.
I upgraded a few of the things. I think it was just mostly the health, and then there was one other thing that movement speed, I think it was. But the problem is that to upgrade you have to kill animals, and I sold all of the meat accidentally instead of allocating them to the dishes. And yeah, so then after that, I don't know if there's finite resources. I'm assuming there is because I couldn't find anywhere to get more fish.
Yeah, they put the big X over that animal once you hunt it. Yeah,
it's like, you're welcome, Duke. Have some fish for dinner.
Yeah, all the inventory stuff I think was like 2 steps forward, 1 step back in a lot of ways, where I liked them kind of divvying it up between the food being its own thing, weapons and other stuff being their own thing, and then like the rare collectibles being their own thing that you're then selling to get money to get the upgrades and stuff. I was always very satisfied with the loop of that. I always felt like I was every time I saw that I was near Duke's room, I got excited. I was like, oh, what am I going to be able to get now? You know, like I'm going to sell something. I'll get enough money to be able to buy some type of upgrade. I'm stoked about this. But then there were rare exceptions of just things not working the way that I feel like they should. Like you were saying that the collectibles aren't on your inventory screen, but the food is.
You're right.
So if you have food that you're just kind of holding and you're trying to wait to find other food to be able to not do the defense, but instead do the health upgrade, that's taking up your weapon inventory. And I'm like, that seems like a bad call. Like you didn't need to do that, because then the only way to get rid of it is either get the other animals that you need, which is not just something you can do whenever you want. It's very specific kind of times things open up that you can go do that. But then the other side of it is just like you can sell the meat like Britt was talking about, but then you sold it and you're like, I guess I made a little money, but I can't get that back. So
actually what I found out you can do, Tim, and I don't know if you tried this, is you can deposit the meat into the upgrade that you want when you're talking to the Duke. So you can get it out of your inventory. So you don't have to like hold on. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's great. That's
Pro
great.
tip.
It should have just never touched the inventory. It should have just done straight to that. But
Went
yeah.
to your valuables, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Huh. Well, that's good. That's a good hint out there for people to not waste their inventory.
Got you.
Wow. What were your guys' overall thoughts on the kind of potential of sequels and stuff for this?
Oh God, we need a spoiler cast for this, man. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Spoiler free, obviously. Resident Evil is notorious for always leaving the ending very vague. You're always wondering, like, what are they doing next? You know, and this one, I am not freaking sure. I don't know. Like, there are so many ways it could go and so many twists that could happen after you see, you know, the ending. I don't know what to think. One possibility has me really excited. One possibility has me kind of like, I don't know if I'm digging this, but we'll have to see.
I'm of two
serious
minds about it, right? Like, yeah, it definitely needs to be a spoiler thing. But for me, there's the one side of like, oh, that's interesting where the game ends and what they end it with and what that would actually look like. But then there's always this side of me that with Resident Evil in particular really wishes they would go and do like basically what I always said Fear the Walking Dead should be, which would be, let's just start a new story. You're new people in this zombie apocalypse. What does that look like? Where do you go from? Let's kick it off that way, rather than keep trying to tie back into the convoluted story they've done now over 8 games and trying to figure out what plot holes and things they've left out and yada, yada, yada. Like for me, I always talk about like, you know, the old Resident Evil, and Resident Evil 2, right? Like those are the games I play, and I'm always like, man, I wish it was just zombies. I wish it didn't evolve into this giant, bigger, here's this weird fleshy blob that I'm fighting that isn't about undead people at all. Like, so it's like I'm interested to see what they do, but I still want them to strip it back, because I do think one of the strengths of 7 was jumping in and just being a scary ass fucking game that at the very end was like, guess what? It's also part of the world you may or may not know, and we'll kind of explain it and kind of not. And if you're interested, like I was at the end of 7, like we were talking about with the end of 8, like with Blessing, end of 7, I finished and I was like, Tim, what the fuck's going on? And I went and read Wikipedias and I went and tried to put it all together. Whereas with 8, right, I was just like, all right, like I didn't need this entire journey to be like how it was here. I'd rather, again, it's the weird thing of what we're talking about and what Britt's talking about in the line they try to walk with this of like, this one I think tries to veer more back to like, no, this is canon. This is Resident Evil. This is what's going on. And where I'm just like, well, I just want to be a scary game that doesn't worry so much about that or seem to worry so much about that.
Bless.
Yeah, I think the Resident Evil 7 comparison works really well in terms of Resident Evil 7 being more focused, because I think that's the thing that's working about the game as I'm playing it currently. That's the thing that's working about it for me that felt a bit messy in 8 is the fact that, yeah, it is about you are in this compound. It is this family. It is zombies or whatever the fuck they call them in the Resident Evil universe. I assume zombies.
Molded.
Wait, what are the molded? Is that they call them molded?
Molded,
These
yeah.
guys,
Resident Evil 7, yeah,
And
right.
7, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. But yeah, you're fighting those guys. I've
Spoilers
never
for the
heard
end of
zombies
Resident
called
Evil 7.
molded. But yeah, you're doing that, and it feels like more of a contained thing and therefore more focused. In Village, I felt like lost a bit of that focus in the overall package, even though I think that worked out well in terms of it trying to do all these different things and some of them working, some of them might not working as well. It makes me wonder if the next Resident Evil is going to go back into feeling like something more focused. And the things that this game points to in terms of it having a sequel makes me think that maybe not. But I will say that like it feels like at points this game was trying so hard to get me to go, oh fuck yeah, more Resident Evil, and I never got all the way there. Like I was never like, like, oh, I'm excited to see where the story goes. I'm excited to play Resident Evil, whatever the next Resident Evil is, just from a I like these games now kind of thing. But I'm not like, from a story perspective, it didn't get me too ecstatic.
My gut tells me we never see the sequel to this game.
Really?
I hope you're right, Tim. And I mean, I'm not saying like, again, like I think this was a really great game. It's just, again, like I'm approaching it from the perspective of like, a super nerd here. My theories here is like we've seen the RE2 remake, we've seen the RE3 remake. I have a sneaking suspicion that we might ended up, the Revelations 3 is being teased. We're going to see more of the old school Resident Evil being explored in spin-off titles. Like, that's my hope. I think the end of Resident Evil 3 remake, like, I have my theories about that, what that could mean. But yeah, you have, like, this ending of Village, again, no spoilers, where there was one point where I'm like, that's fucking cool. And then there was another little, like, scene that happened, and I was like, what are they doing and why are they doing that? And I think that's where I'm at. So I'm like, I want them to explore one aspect of that ending, but I don't really care for another aspect of that ending, because then what happens is you're just creating a whole bunch of more plot holes. And maybe some people don't care about that. Maybe all they care about is just getting the crap scared out of them. And if that's like what you're into, cool. But I would like to see like the story kind of like tie some knots together and like come together. But we'll just
before we keep talking, let me tell you about our sponsors.
This episode of PS I Love You XOXO is brought to you by Gabby. When it comes to car insurance and home insurance, don't we deserve better? I know I do. I know Tim does. Tim put his policy to the test with Gabby, and they literally... I'm sorry, I spoiled what's going to happen. They literally stand for Get a Better Insurance. Gabby, G-A-B-I, you get it? Getting better insurance with Gabby means a better price for the same insurance coverage. Who knew such a thing existed? You might, because Gabby's awesome and has supported Kind of Funny a bunch, but I'll get there in a second. They are one of the true comparison platforms with real rates. They give you an apples-to-apples comparison of your current coverage with 40 of the top insurance providers like Progressive, Nationwide, and Travelers, all in one place. Use your current insurance information to get started, and in just minutes, you'll be able to see quotes for the exact same coverage you currently have, and it's free to use. That's what Tim Gettys did a couple months ago when Gabby first sponsored us. Tim took his auto insurance and put it to the test. He went to Gabby, already had his information for what he had, put it into Gabby, got a whole bunch of different rates. Turned out, of course, he already had the best rates, and so no harm, no foul, but it was good to know, and that's what Gabby can do. It can obviously find you better rates, but if it doesn't, because you already have great stuff, cool, you didn't lose anything. Gabby customers save $961 per year on average, and they'll never sell your info, so no annoying spam or robocalls. This is just making sure you have the best deal. Put your policy to the test like Tim did. Get a better insurance with Gabby. It's totally free to check out, and there's no obligation. Go to Gabby.com/kindafunny. That again is GABI.com/kindafunny. Gabby.com/kindafunny. Now, of course, I'm Greg Miller, ladies and gentlemen, but this turns out is the Tim ad read section, because our next sponsor is Canva Pro. Canva Pro is an easy-to-use design platform that has everything you need to design like a pro. Whether you're a professional designer or just getting started, Canva Pro can help boost you and your team's productivity and creativity. It's a quick, easy, and affordable way to design whatever you need. No matter what you're creating or sharing, Canva Pro has everything you need in one place, including a collection of over 75 million premium photos, videos, audio, files, and graphics. Plus, Canva Pro comes with time-saving tools that simplify and speed up the creative process. You get all of this and more in just one Canva Pro subscription. Tim is the guy who's been using this at Kind of Funny. I asked him about it, and he said this: I love it. It is such a great tool for creators of any type to take the not fun parts out of thumbnails, logo, graphic design. You can see how we use it in general. Very sleek designs and templates for presentations, social media content, videos, and everything in between. That means all of us can benefit from Canva Pro, because I know I'm using social media all the time. Design like a pro with Canva Pro. Right now, you can get a free 45-day extended trial when you use our promo code. Just go to canva.me/KF Games to get your free 45-day extended trial. That's canva.me/KF Games. Canva.me/KF Games.
Yeah, but going back to that, I think the biggest issue I'm having is I loved this video game. I didn't love any of the story and stuff, and there was a lot of it. And that's kind of it kind of being at odds with itself, where it feels like it was torn between being a Resident Evil lore story, but also being but newbies can jump into this too and not need to care. So it didn't really deliver for either of those camps from a story perspective. And like, that's a bummer because there were some really cool characters in this that, I feel could have served a better story much better. And it could have been something where I'm like glowing about this as opposed to just really loving it from a gameplay perspective. Like, so far, this is my game of the year. And I don't think that that's crazy because there hasn't really been too many games coming out. And I have a feeling in a couple weeks when Ratchet comes out, it's going to be dethroned. But I think that the gameplay here and what they have you do is absolutely worth playing. And I think that it is a very well-designed game, and that Capcom's clearly learning from their mistakes in the past from a gameplay perspective. They're clearly not learning from all the other aspects that make this what it is, because Resident Evil isn't just gameplay. It is character. It is story. And especially coming from Mario 2 and 3 that had such fun performances. Like those remakes, both of them, B-movie as hell, campy as all shit, but like it felt right. Whereas with this, it's like, just stop talking like that. Like, Greg, you brought up The Room.
That.
Yeah, it's The Room sometimes, and like
for sure. And it's that weird thing of like, I was so excited to hear Britt wasn't super high on it. Like when I was playing it, and Jen's watching me play it and talking to me about it, every time I'd be like, I'm like, but this story and this acting, and I was like, but like, I know that when we reviewed 7, we also talked about like how VO was bad at times, and obviously you can reach all the way back to Jill Sandwich, and like I understand that there is a legacy / lineage for it. So, but I'm glad that it does resonate across the board. Of like, I just felt like it missed the mark here, and I feel like that's what's so weird about this one. Of like, yeah, I played it all the way through, and I really do feel like, whereas I have so many fond memories of 7, and like watching Andy and Bless play 7, I was like, oh man, this is great, and I can't wait for them to get to this moment. I don't have that with Village, I don't think Village is going to be a game I can look back at it and be like, oh, that was what was great about Village. Because for me, the parts I was enjoying were the exploration, figuring out how to open doors, and so on. The boss fights I always thought were uninteresting, not that challenging. And if they were challenging, it was usually frustrating. I think of the third biomes boss where it was just like, this is annoying. I'm not even enjoying this. I'm annoyed right now. And, like my, I don't know, 4th try, 5th try, whatever it was, and probably had a couple quick deaths, but like my 4th real try of it, I beat it. It was like, this wasn't that it was like, ooh, it wasn't like Returnal, where when I lose in Returnal, right, and I'm like, that's on me. I should have done this and I should have done that, and blah, blah, blah. This was just like, I was backing up and got caught on the geometry of this corner, and that sucks. That's why I died in this stupid thing. Or
and like for me in similar situations, right? Like for me in the boss battles, is more so me emptying my bullets as much as possible, because I know once I run out of bullets in this boss fight, that means the boss fight is going to be over. Like, and that didn't make it as fun.
And dude, like again, no spoilers, be very clear, but the final boss fight, like I almost text you at one point, Bless. I'm like, am I missing something? And then it was like, no, it's like when Nick always argues about Superman. It's like, just punch harder, just punch more, just shoot more. Oh, okay. Like I wasn't getting any. Like, we talk about gameplay loops, and we talk about, boss fights and phases. And it was like, I was getting no positive reinforcement other than new lines of dialogue that I was doing something correct. It wasn't like, it was like I was shooting and then there would be like, it was like, I'm shooting. Is this working? Shooting. I don't know. Shoot. Oh, okay. Well, they've moved a little bit. Something's changed. Even the boss fight, I didn't like it in the third biome, right? Like colors started to change. And I was like, all right, I'm actually doing something here at least.
Yeah, I'm with you, Greg, that the third boss fight and the final boss fight, I was like, oh, man, I really didn't like these, and I think that they missed the mark. All the other ones I really enjoyed because they served their purpose, and I liked that they weren't overly complicated. I feel in a lot of the other games, including RE2 and 3 Remake, there's a lot of just kind of like, shoot, run around to have to reload and like wait a while, and it's like, it's not fun for me, whereas these were fun because like the reward was always, we're going to get the next story beat, we're going to get a cutscene, we're going to progress, we're going to see what is the next thing, like what's the next character gonna bring me, that's gonna make me shit my pants. And I appreciated all that stuff because it's like it felt like I was getting what I wanted from it, and it did go by so quickly. Because yeah, it's just like once I feel like the boss fights were designed to be a breeze. And I'm okay with that because the challenge comes from the puzzles and all that stuff. And I feel like it's kind of a reward to be a badass and be able to just kill these motherfuckers that have been causing you so much trouble. And on top of that, I think that the mini bosses and the way that they treat normal characters, like the first time you're introduced to a new enemy type, where it does feel like it's a bit more designed like a mini boss fight. And I thought that they really did a good job with those, with rare exception. But it kind of felt dynamic. Like I feel like in the game, there was a lot of moments that obviously were scripted, but when you are just walking around the village, things happen. And I was just like, that felt really cool. Like that felt like oddly designed in a way I wouldn't have expected this kind of hub world to feel. And it felt more similar to the classic Resident Evil 1 moment of the dog jumping through the window and scaring you. You know, it's like they managed to somehow keep that going for me throughout the game in every single system that we were in.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say it was definitely an improvement over Resident Evil 7, where you just had the molded characters, enemies rather, and you had the main bakers that were, the bad guys. And there was definitely a much more interesting variety of enemy types in this. You had every biome you went to, there was something different to fight. All I want to say is, every developer out there, please stop putting lore important dialogue in the middle of your boss fights. I'm trying to shoot your head off. For the love of God, I don't need to be like being told all the story twists and turns at this point.
Thank you, Brittany.
That's all I have to say.
Ain't it the truth?
Did you guys all play on PS5?
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you guys feel about how the DualSense stuff worked? Because it was mainly, it was mainly just like the way you aim feels different for each.
There's
of the
some
guns.
adaptive
Like,
trigger stuff, yeah, right? Like
Yeah,
I
the
feel like when I
adaptive
was using
trigger,
my
when you're-
shotgun, I felt it a bit.
Yeah,
exactly. Do you guys like it?
It was fine. I don't think it was a transformative experience, but it definitely added to the immersion. Like when you're switching guns, like just like hitting the D-pad to switch between the guns, like the controller has like a kind of like depending on the gun you're going to, and it feels like putting a gun together, And it's like it's little things like that that really just add to this whole thing. This game's atmosphere is incredible, and it's because like the beginning of the game, when I don't know how much I can talk about this, but
I slacked you things.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at it. But I mean, whatever. I can say this. You're in a house and there's just lighting coming through the windows. It's scary, just inherently, just because it looks so damn good that you're in this house and you don't know what's going on. And then some scary shit goes, or not scary shit, some shit goes down, and you're just like, okay, this is intense. And the game immediately then drops you off somewhere. And you're just like, everywhere you're, it's so hard to talk about.
I know,
I know.
What we're allowed to say. But like, what I'm trying to say is, when you're in the village and you're walking around the snow and you're walking through branches and there's crows flying around and the moonlight is coming through, this game is freaking gorgeous. The RE engine is so good. Bless was talking about the facial animations and all that stuff. That there are moments that it just looks like real life, and that is scary as shit. Like, scary games shouldn't look this good because it just like adds that extra level. And on top of that, the sound. Now, one thing, Britt, you're talking about not wanting boss dialogue to be super important to the story. One thing I want is in horror games, sound design matters so much. And this game has such killer sound design, but I don't need to hear my own footsteps. I don't need to hear the noises that my character is making. If there's a noise, if something falls, I want to know it's someone else. You know what I mean? Like it breaks me from the immersion because it's like, because it just that doesn't work this way. Like the first person character that the camera's working with isn't a human being. You know what I mean? Like it's like a different hitbox type thing. So it's like we'll be hitting doors and stuff and like freaking me out when I'm like that. There's nothing there. But that's just a minor thing that like really would go a long way to just make the experience better.
I always hated it when you would back into a door unknowingly and the door would creak open behind you. I'm like, thanks. I really needed that. But no, this game is
It happens all the
stunning.
time.
Yeah, it's super stunning and beautiful. Like, you've been in lockdown for far too long when you're like in this fucked up village, but you're like, oh, it's so pretty. And you just want to like spend a few minutes like gazing around because it does look so real. Like, oh, look, it's a river. Oh my God, look, it's like outside in fresh air. I haven't seen this in real life in so long. It is stunning. And I think, again, like I think this game did a lot of things right. I think from a Resident Evil perspective, though, there are just some things that, it's interesting because if you look at the leap from RE6 to RE7, it was huge. I mean, RE6 is notoriously like one of the worst Resident Evil games ever. Like, I hate saying it, but we all know it's kind of true. And they come out with something like RE7, which kind of like almost reinvented the series, which is like, oh my God, they nailed it. They're doing such a great job. And then it feels like with RE8, they're still trying to kind of reinvent the wheel with some different enemy types, some new players to the game. They're trying to like figure out like where they're going to go with this. And I think some of it's a hit, some of it's a miss. And so I guess like my expectations that I would want to set for anyone is if you're a hardcore Resident Evil fan and you're looking for some like plot holes to be filled, like, just like keep your head on straight, have realistic expectations. You're not going to get that super like, you're going to get some of it. Don't get me wrong, you're going to get some of it, but you're not going to get like some of the answers that we've all been waiting for since 2017. But again, if you're just looking for something that will scratch that itch, scare the crap out of you, something fun to play, I think this game would hit that mark.
Yeah,
I agree.
Do you guys recommend it, Greg and Bless?
Yeah, I'd recommend it if you're a Resident Evil fan or you're a survival horror fan or you're looking for a fun single player action game to play. Like I think it is a fun game that doesn't, I think, reinvent the wheel or do anything spectacular, but is still at its core a fun, enjoyable experience. And so if you're looking for that, I would say 100% go for it.
And yeah, for me, I wouldn't recommend it. And it's not because I hated it, and it's not because I think it's a terrible game or anything like that. I just don't think it does anything remarkable enough that I was like, oh, you got to play this if you like X, Y, and Z. Like, I think the thing I like the most about it is that moment to moment between the bosses of going around and getting the right key to open the next door to find the next secret. You get the treasure map and like the feeling of getting the X's over the treasure and what's going to be in there. Like, I liked that experience enough, but I don't think that's enough of a ringing endorsement for me to go recommend you spend $60 or $70 on it. Or is this one of the $70 ones? I can never remember what's $70 anymore.
Full price.
I wouldn't recommend you go spend full price on this. Yeah. But again, I can't speak from a Resident Evil fan's perspective, right? And I use that loosely. Obviously, I enjoyed two of the most recent ones, but you know what I mean? I don't have a history with it where I'm like, this is what it is. But for everybody else, I would say no.
I would highly recommend it. I would say take all the Resident Evil stuff out of it. Like, don't go into this wanting that stuff or expecting that stuff. Like, I think that if you're just expecting a really, really great game that's like a technical marvel, this is that in spades. And there are a lot of surprising moments in it that are legitimately scary. And I don't want to say fun because it's not fun, but it's engaging. It nails what it's going for. And I think that's really all I could have asked for. But moving on from Resident Evil just a little bit, I want to talk about Game of the Year. This is my Game of the Year so far. What would you guys say your Game of the Year so far is? Brittany?
Yeah, I would say this is my Game of the Year so far. I mean, there's not a heck of a lot stacked up against it, to be honest. But I mean, again, like this is a great game, and I think it definitely could win Game of the Year, and it will be a lot of people's personal Game of the Year. Now, granted, if we do get like a little game called God of War this year, we'll see what happens with that, and especially Horizon and whatnot. But as of right now, like yeah, I'd say so for sure.
Bless.
Yeah, I've been keeping like a notes app track of like the games that I super love this year, and like,
I do that too, Bless.
Yeah,
Nice.
so like we're super nerds out here.
Yep.
Spreadsheeting all our games that we play. But like my top 3 for this year are like number 1, Returnal, number 2, It Takes Two, and number 3, Hitman 3. Those are the top 3 that I've absolutely adored. And yeah, Returnal. We've reviewed Returnal on other shows, but how addicting it was, right? Like, and continues to be, like, still grabs me, and it being a next gen game that I think succeeds at being next gen, succeeds at being a PS5 game, really shows off the DualSense, and is a next level game for Housemarque. I think it succeeds so well at all those things, and so it still continues to be my Game of the Year currently.
Yeah, for me, Game of the Year right now, yeah, I opened up my GG app where I've been keeping track of my games over there. Thank you very much, everybody. Best friend obviously made the GG app. It's really good. It's free. Go try it out. You can pay for it if you want to. And looking through it just to see, because it is that question of, man, we've played so much this year already. What would it be? For me, yeah, Returnal, I think would be probably Game of the Year. And right there with it would be It Takes Two, just to copy Bless totally. But I think to talk to what those games are. He is. That's why it's future class video games. You know what I mean? Either fall behind or get out of the way. One of those kind of things. I think both those games are fantastic, and I'd be shocked if by the end of the year, Resident Evil Village is in the real conversation for Game of the Year. I just don't think it's that impressive.
Yeah, I don't think it's Game of the Year like as an overall thing, but I do think it's going to be on people's top list in some form. I bet by the end of the year, it'll be top 5 for me for sure, but it'll be debatably top 3.
Interesting.
But also,
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I
See,
really.
I'm
I'm glad you love
this
it. I'm
game,
not.
man.
This isn't.
Oh, yeah,
just to be clear.
hey,
Yeah.
it is what it is. And again, it's not a perfect game, but like what I like about Resident Evil, it did a lot of. So it's like that's kind of what I'm going into. And also, I imagine a lot of games this year are going to get delayed. Like I'm starting to look down the path, and I'm like, I don't know what would be above this necessarily, like in quantity, right? But speaking of that, like what games do you think are upcoming this year besides Ratchet? Let's go one step further than that. What are you guys targeting as the game that you think will be on your game of the year list?
Oh man, I'm gonna open up my GG app because that's a good idea. I have like my games I want to play list that I got going. So come back to me a second.
I mean, a lot of like my top contenders are games where like, are they coming out this year? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of Horizon Forbidden West. I'm thinking of God of War Ragnarok. I'm thinking of Dying Light 2. Like if those are coming, those could very well knock Resident Evil Village off of that list. But those are just the 3 that comes to mind.
Britt, I saw Dying Light 2 behind closed doors with you. It feels like 17 years ago
I
at
think it
E3.
was 17 years ago. I think it was.
Do you guys think we'll ever see Dying Light 2?
It's supposed to come this year. They did a whole YouTube
A lot of
video
things are
talking about
supposed to
how they got it planned this year, and I don't believe them for a second.
I don't know, man. There's been where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And if you listen to and read all the articles about some of the development hell that Techland's been supposedly going through, like it's hard to believe that some of that isn't true, right? I don't know if that game's coming this year. I would love for it to, but damn, like I don't know, man.
I've talked about before how I believe this year is the year of the indie game, and I think that is really going to shine through in Game of the Year time, right? Because like for me, when I look at the games that I'm anticipating, I forget if Aztec Forgotten Gods is actually slated for this year, but like I mean that's on my list. There's Q4 this year.
That's what he says. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
hell yeah! Nobody Saves the World is up there.
Yeah. Nobody
for me.
Saves the World looks great.
Yeah, that's definitely up there. Deathloop,
Back for
like
Blood.
Barrett said.
I want to toss Back for Blood out.
Oh yeah.
I think that's gonna be a fun time. Well, it'll be game of the year. I'm not going that far, but I'm saying you're talking about games that I think are gonna be awesome this year that I'm excited to play. Back for Blood's on there. Deathloop is on there. Who knows? Far Cry 6, it could easily just be, it's more Far Cry, which is always fun and great. But are they pushing that envelope? Changing
It
anything
will
with
be.
that?
What?
Yeah.
Do you guys think there's any chance it's not just more Far Cry?
No.
Because I don't think there is.
No.
I think they
thought
could.
Far Cry
I don't think
5
they're
was
gonna.
gonna be- was
I don't think they're going to drastically change the format or yada, 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 but I think they could take the feedback of 5 and put it in there to remove the fatigue that wore people down and the things that push people off, even though then there's people like Nick that loved it and played it, stem to stern. I think there's things that could be changed in it that could drag it back towards, well, man, when Far Cry 3 dropped and we were all like, holy shit, this is great.
There's also 12 minutes. I want to give a shout out to.
Oh, yeah, 12
yeah,
minutes.
I think
Great
that's gonna be
one,
big
great
for
one.
people, and also Kena Bridge of Spirits is another
Yeah.
one that's coming out this year that has a possibility of being big for people. Also,
Halo
Solar
Infinite.
Ash.
Is Ghostwire
Tim's
Tokyo
favorite.
coming out this year? That's
Which
supposed
one?
to
It's
come out.
supposed
Ghostwire
to,
Tokyo.
yeah.
Yeah. That could be
I believe when you
interesting.
see it. I think Life is Strange True Colors look really cool. I was having that moment today where I was getting ready to play something. I was like, what do I want to play? And I was like, oh man, Life is Strange. A new Life is Strange would hit real hard
yeah.
right now.
There's also Sifu. Sifu's supposed to come out. Wait,
that
actually,
was
yeah.
Awesome.
is that supposed to come out this year?
It's up in the
I
air,
lost track of
think.
all dates.
I drafted it on my fantasy critic league, so hopefully.
Oh, you're a madman.
Yeah.
Pokemon.
It's set for 2021 currently.
Oh hell yeah! Okay, then yeah, Sifu is definitely I think in the conversation for me in terms of games I'm excited for that maybe could be of that rank, and then Pokemon Brilliant Diamond I'm very excited for.
Yeah, bless. There you go.
Mario Golf.
Oh,
Oh,
my
Golf
God.
Super
yeah.
Rush.
Dude, Breath of the Wild 2. Like let's manifest it while we're here.
Let's make it
Let's
happen. man.
manifest it.
All, like,
Starfield,
give
why
it-
not?
Oh fuck, bless. Come on.
Let's make this year the best year.
Oh man. Well, with that, everybody, this has been the Kind of Funny Gamescast. Thank you very much for joining us today for this Resident Evil Village review. Brittany, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
How are you feeling right now? You are pregnant as hell.
I'm pregnant as fuck, Tim. Yeah, I was telling you guys before the show started, I feel like a bloater from Tilu a lot of the time, but it is what it is. I'm here. I'm just happy, because this is probably going to be my last week on What's Good, and then I'm taking a 3-month hiatus. This will be a good way to end it, talking about Resident Evil. So I can't say it didn't go out on brand.
I love it. It's
True.
fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're about to do the post show for patreon.com/kindoffunnygames supporters with Britt. So stay tuned for that. But for everyone else, I love you. Goodbye.